Good evening everyone. Today I am going to present on a topic that is related to the teaching and learning of the English language. So language learning is a very complex and difficult process. So today in my presentation I am going to talk about how this complex process can be made easier with the help of the multimedia resources. So this is the topic of discussion today: ICT in language learning, use of multimedia resources in English language learning. So English language is the second language for our Indian students. So how, through different multimedia resources, we can make this process much easier? That is the topic of discussion today. So before going directly into the topic, let us discuss a very famous Chinese proverb, that is, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. So we can say that through multimedia resources, a teacher, specifically a language teacher, can involve his or her students in the teaching learning process and thereby make them learn the language. So what is language learning? Before talking about how to use multimedia resources in language learning, let us discuss a little bit about what exactly is language learning. So language learning is a process of learning to use a language to express oneself and communicate with others properly by developing all the four linguistic skills. Those are listening, speaking, reading and writing. So language is a means of communication, right? So in order to communicate with others and to some extent in order to share our views, our opinions, our ideas with others, with the world outside and also to our own self, we use language, right? Language connects us with the world outside, right? So language learning, from our very childhood, we learn languages. First, we learn our mother tongue, and then through formal education, we learn second language. And the second language can be various languages, like for example, Hindi, it can be English, it can be Sanskrit, it can be any other language apart from one's mother tongue or the first language, right? So in language learning, what a learner does, a learner learns how to use that target language to convey his or her feelings, his or her opinions, and communicate with others. And in that process, the learner develops the four major linguistic skills. Those are listening, speaking, reading and writing. So this is the process of language learning in a few words. So language learning is an active process. Yes, in language learning, to learn a language, the learner must take part in the whole process of language learning. The learner must be active in order to be able to use that language properly, right? So as I have already told, language learning is also a complex process. So how, through different multimedia resources, we can make this complex process an easier one? That is the main focus of this presentation. So before that, let us discuss what are the multimedia resources. So multimedia resources, those are a combination of multiple media formats. So those formats are text, audio, still images, animation, video, graphics like charts and graphs, etc. And these are some of the formats that are included in multimedia resources. And when all these resources used with the help of ICT, information and communication technologies, in the teaching learning process of language, then we find the whole process of learning and teaching a language to be much easier. Okay, so let's discuss how we can use multimedia resources in education, overall education, not only in language education but overall education, how we can use those resources. So using multimedia resources, it plays a significant role in education system in the 21st century. So this is the age of globalization, right? So with the help of globalization, we are using internet at present. So how? Through ICT, different information and communication technologies, through different multimedia resources, we can make the education process much more easier, much more learner-centered. That is the focus here. So the multimedia resources can be used with the help of information and communication technologies, and we require internet connectivity as well to use those resources. So the multimedia resources help both the teachers and the students to make the classroom activities more effective and successful. Yes, these resources, multimedia resources, for example, as we have already discussed, animation, various videos, these help not only the teachers but also the students to make the classroom activities more effective. So the main aim of using these multimedia resources is to involve the students in the teaching learning process. And when the students get involved in the process, they learn. We have all may have heard about learning by doing, what Mahatma Gandhiji said, that students learn better when they get involved in the process of teaching and learning. So the multimedia resources, they give the students, they give the learners an opportunity to participate in the teaching learning process. And this way, those resources make the process more effective and successful. Multimedia resources help the teachers to adopt different teaching methods and cater to the needs and interests of the students. Yes, we all know that a classroom is a mixture. In a classroom, we can find students who are of different nature. They are of different capabilities. They are of different. Their needs may be different. Their interests may be different. So a classroom is a combination of different types of students. So as they are different, and as well at the same time they are unique, their needs and their interests are also unique. Their needs and interests are also different from one another. So with the help of these multimedia resources, a teacher can adopt different methods, different teaching methods in his or her classroom. And this way, the teacher successfully cater to the needs of the students. So if a particular student, he or she is more comfortable in learning by hearing sounds, the teacher can play an audio recording. And if another student likes to learn something, he or she is comfortable in learning something by seeing the content, by visualizing the content, so the teacher can play a video, play an audio visual aid in the classroom, and he or she can show different charts with the help of some PPT, right? He or she can show some animated videos, right? So this way, different kinds of students, they will feel comfortable, they will be involved in the teaching learning process, right? So these are the ways we can use multimedia resources in education. So how we can use multimedia resources in a language classroom, specifically in an English language classroom. So using multimedia resources in language learning is a recent phenomenon. Yes, for a long time there was no concept of using multimedia resources in language learning, because language learning was done in a more conventional way. So now this modern technology, this ICT, these multimedia resources, they have changed the entire picture of English language teaching. So now an English teacher uses these multimedia resources to minimize the gap between a native and a non-native English speaker, and this way the teacher can develop accurate pronunciation and vocabulary among the learners. Yes, it is a very important use of the multimedia resources. For example, in an English language classroom, we can play an audio recording, right? So of a native speaker, right? This way, the learners who are non-native speakers, they will be able to learn the accurate pronunciation of the words, and they will be able to learn different vocabularies, right? So this way, the teacher, the English teacher, can minimize the gap between a native speaker and a non-native speaker, and the learners will be able to learn the language properly and accurately. Then these multimedia resources make English language learning fun and enjoyable. Yes, when an animated video is played in the classroom, immediately the students, the learners, they get attracted to the teaching learning process, right? We all love to watch animated videos. No matter, it can be the students can be young students of primary level students, or the students can be university level students. All learners, actually all human beings, we love videos, watching animated, specifically animated videos. And this way the English teachers can make the teaching learning process of the English language more fun and enjoyable to the learners. Then those videos, those pictures, those graphics can also enhance the creativity of the students and the imagination of the learners. And these multimedia resources are used to develop the the communicative skills of the learners. Yes, when the videos are played, when conversational videos are played in the classroom, in an English classroom, the students will learn how to communicate properly, accurately with others. And this way, they will be able to communicate more confidently and comfortably. So these are the ways that we have discussed of using the multimedia resources in an English language classroom. Now I am going to discuss the advantages of using multimedia resources in language learning. So these are the advantages. The multimedia resources, they give the learners a lot of exposure to the target language. Yes, through multimedia resources, the students get more exposure to the language, how the particular word is pronounced, how it should be, how there are different words, different vocabularies which can mean similar things, right? So this way, by listening to different audios, listening to songs, listening to or watching videos, so this way, through different multimedia resources, we as a teacher, we can give a lot of exposure to the target language. Then the multimedia resources, they create an adequate environment for English language learning. Yes, in language learning, it can be English or it can be any other language. When a second language is being taught to the learners, then the environment plays a very important role. So the multimedia resources, they create an adequate environment through songs, through videos, through animated videos, through audio recordings. The teacher can build an environment that is sufficient, that is adequate to learn the English language, right? So the multimedia resources also help in developing a deeper understanding by connecting the verbal and visual representations of the content. Yes, in the textual in the texts, the content is represented verbally or through uh, by in the through conversation, through speaking. The teacher is giving the teacher gives a verbal representation of the content. But when those verbal representations are mm, visually shown to the students with the help of different multimedia resources, the learning becomes more enjoyable, and the learners also develop a deeper understanding of the content. Another advantage of using multimedia resources in English language learning is, as we have already discussed, the multimedia resources give the learners proper guidance to accurate pronunciation of the English words. Yes, through different audios, audio recordings, through different videos, the learners get to know how to pronounce the words, English words, properly and accurately. Then another advantage is the multimedia resources, they motivate the learners to learn the language. Yes, in learning this a second language, motivation is very much important. And when the learners are motivated intrinsically, then the teaching and learning of the English language becomes much more effective, successful, and also easier. So, these are some of the advantages of using multimedia resources in language learning. So, now let's discuss uh, what are the disadvantages of using the multimedia resources. So, using multimedia resources in language learning makes the entire process much expensive. Yes, using the multimedia resources is a bit expensive because the school or the education institution, it needs certain kind of facilities, infrastructural facilities, to be able to use the multimedia resources. For example, um, 24 hours electricity connection, good electricity connection, as I as I should say, then internet connection, then um, overhead projectors, and all those sorts of things. So it makes the whole process more expensive. Then too much dependence on multimedia resources can hamper the abstract thinking of the students. Yes, when everything is shown to the students, everything is given to them ready made, then the students will not use their brain, they will not be able to think the abstract concepts, right, that is in language learning process. So too much dependence also is not that good, too much dependence on the multimedia resources, right? So then using the multimedia resources can also be time consuming. For example, they can take up a lot of real teaching time. When the teacher is concentrated, when the teacher focuses more on using the multimedia resources in the class, then the actual teaching time, it lessens, right? So then there can be seen a lack of knowledge and proper training of how to use the multimedia resources to teach the English language effectively. So there can be a lack of proper training, and which can make the process of learning a language unsuccessful. Right. So the next one is there is a lack of infrastructural facilities in most of the schools. As we have already discussed, it is much expensive, and it results that in many of the schools that are in the remote villages and in the remote places, most of the schools, they do not have these infrastructural facilities that are required to use the multimedia resources. So when those facilities are not there, how can those schools, how can those education institutions, they use the multimedia resources in the teaching learning process, right? So after discussing the disadvantages of the multimedia resources, here are some recommendations to make the teaching learning process through multimedia resources more successful. So, the first recommendation is role of the teachers in a teaching learning process should be active. Yes, the teacher needs to play an active role in teaching the target language, teaching English in this case, through the multimedia resources. When the teacher plays an active role, when the teacher decides what resources should be used to suit that suits the content, what resources will be appropriate for the particular student, for a particular student, or for the entire class, what resources should be used to make the classroom activities more effective. When the teacher plays the active role, then only the teaching learning process of English language becomes successful. Then the teachers should motivate the students to communicate in English inside the classroom. Yes, the teachers should motivate the students so that they use the English language, that is the target language, in the classroom conversation, in the classroom communication, so that they can become more uh, they can become more comfortable in using the language to communicate. Then the teacher must use a combination of both traditional as well as modern uh, methods of teaching the English language. Modern methods will include the multimedia resources. So basically the thing is the teacher should not be completely dependent on the traditional methods of teaching and teaching the English language, as well as he or she should not be too much dependent on the multimedia resources. So there should be a balance between these two methods of teaching the English language. The teacher should be able to use a mixture of both the two methods, both traditional method as well as multimedia resources. So then another recommendation is overuse of multimedia resources should be avoided. Yes, we have already discussed that overuse of multimedia resources can hamper the abstract thinking of the students, right? As well as it can also take up the time of real teaching. So overuse should be avoided. And when all these requirements will be fulfilled, only then the teaching and learning process of English language through multimedia resources can be successful. So, to conclude, I can say that using multimedia resources in an English language classroom is a useful way to teach the target language. Yes, it's a very useful way. Only we have to use those multimedia resources judiciously. It gives, it means the multimedia resources, they give the learners an environment to develop their communicative skills, and they make the language learning process interesting by involving the students in the teaching learning process. Then multimedia resources, they make the English language classroom more student centered. Yes, when the teacher adopts, when the teacher uses different multimedia resources to cater to the needs of the needs and interests of the students, the immediately the classroom becomes more student centered, right? So it also enhances the confidence of the students. The students become comfortable in using the target language. Then using multimedia resources is an effective way of teaching English to the non-native speakers. Yes, through using those multimedia resources, the teacher can teach the English language to the non-native speakers more effectively. So finally we can say that there are so many advantages of using the multimedia resources in an English language classroom. Yeah, there are also some disadvantages, but we can overcome those by using the multimedia resources judiciously and using a method that balances the traditional as well as the modern methods of teaching English language. When we use the multimedia resources in an English classroom, the teaching and learning process make become more enjoyable for the students. It become more interesting and attractive for the students, and the students learn the language, the target language, easily. So these are the references that I have used to prepare this presentation. So this way I will conclude my presentation. So thank you for listening. Thank you.